the intervention my husband's family staged in our own living room, my mother-in-law sat forward with a folder of talking points and said, "Sweetheart, we love you, and that's why we're all here. Your spending, your decisions, they're putting this family at risk. I think it's best if David takes full control of the finances, and if you sign a power of attorney so the family can help protect you from yourself." 8 relatives nodded with rehearsed compassion. My husband wouldn't look at me. And I reached into my bag, pulled out 2 years of bank statements and said, "Before I sign anything, let's look at who's actually been bleeding this family dry. Because I brought the numbers, and they don't say what you think they say. Let me back up. Because to understand how I ended up ambushed in my own living room by 8 people performing concern, you have to understand the years of being the outsider wife and the slow campaign to define me as the problem. And the thing the whole intervention was actually designed to hide, which was not my recklessness, but someone else's. My name is Helena Ashford. I'm 41 years old, and my husband's family staged a fake intervention to seize control of the money my husband and I had built together, by casting me as financially reckless and mentally unstable, when the truth, which their whole theater was designed to bury, was the exact opposite. This is the story of that ambush, and the numbers that turned it inside out, and what I learned about the family I'd married into and the man I'd married. Let me tell you about the Ashfords first, because the intervention didn't come from nowhere. It was the culmination of a decade of being told, in 1,000 small ways, that I didn't belong. I married David 12 years ago, and I married into a family that had never quite accepted me. The Ashfords were an old, tight, controlling clan, the kind of family that operates as a single organism, where the matriarch's opinion is law and where marrying in means being absorbed, not welcomed. And I had not allowed myself to be absorbed. That was my original sin in their eyes. I kept my own career, my own opinions, my own sense of myself. I hadn't dissolved into the Ashford collective the way a proper Ashford wife was supposed to. And for 12 years, my mother-in-law, Deanne, had treated my independence as a threat to be managed. The management took the form it usually takes, a slow, patient campaign to define me, to the family and to David, as difficult. Over the years, Deanne had built a narrative. I was headstrong. I was not a team player. I isolated David from his family. And increasingly in recent years, I was impulsive, not thinking clearly, under a lot of stress. The vocabulary shifting, I'd realized too late, from criticism toward something more clinical, more useful, the language you build when you're preparing to declare someone incapable. Because here is what I didn't understand until the intervention forced me to. Deanne wasn't just managing my independence. She was building a case. For years, quietly, she'd been laying the groundwork to define me as unstable and reckless, so that when the moment came, the family would already believe it. The intervention didn't invent the narrative that I was the problem. It activated a narrative Deanne had spent years installing. And the target, the real target, was the money. David and I had built something over 12 years. Not a fortune, but real security, good careers, careful saving, a paid-off home, investments, the accumulated result of 2 disciplined incomes. And here's the crucial fact, the fact the entire intervention was designed to obscure. I was the disciplined one. I'd always managed our finances because I was good at it and David wasn't. I was a financial controller by profession. Actually, I manage money for a living, which is a detail that will matter enormously. Our security existed because of my discipline. David was the spender, the soft touch, the one who couldn't say no, especially to his family. Especially to his family. That's the thread that runs under everything. Let me tell you about the subplot that saved me, because I didn't see the ambush coming, but someone did, and she warned me, my sister-in-law, David's younger sister, Kate. Kate was the one Ashford who'd never fully drunk the family Kool-Aid. She'd married out, moved away, kept a critical distance from Deanne's control, and she'd always been quietly kind to me, one semi-outsider to another. And a few weeks before the intervention, Kate called me, and her voice was tight, and she said, "Helena, I need to tell you something, and you can't say you heard it from me. The family is planning something. Mom's been organizing it for months. They're going to confront you, stage a kind of intervention about the money. They're going to say you're reckless, that you're unstable, that David needs to take control, and they're going to try to get you to sign a power of attorney." I was stunned. That's insane. I'm the one who manages our money. I'm a financial controller. David can barely balance a checkbook. "I know," Kate said. "That's the part I can't figure out. But Helena, I've heard the way Mom talks about it, and it's organized, it's coordinated, they've got talking points. And there's something underneath it I don't understand, something about the money that they're all very nervous about. I don't know what it is, but be careful. And whatever you do, don't sign anything, please. I've watched this family do things to people, and I couldn't watch them do it to you without warning you. Kate's warning did 2 things. It gave me time to prepare, which is the only reason this story has a good ending. And it planted the crucial question. Why would a family stage an intervention to take financial control away from the person who was good with money and give it to the person who wasn't? That made no sense, unless the intervention wasn't actually about my recklessness at all. Unless it was about hiding something. So I did what I do. I'm a financial controller. When something doesn't add up, I audit. And I spent the weeks before the intervention quietly, carefully, auditing our entire financial life, every account, every transaction, 2 years deep, and I found it. I found what the intervention was designed to hide, because our money had been leaking. Not through my spending was disciplined, documented, exactly what you'd expect from a financial controller. The money had been leaking through David, and more specifically, through David to his family. For 2 years, David had been quietly moving money to the Ashfords, to his mother, to his brother, to the family's needs and ventures and loans that were never repaid. Tens of thousands of dollars, drained out of our joint accounts, funneled to the Ashford Collective, without my knowledge, Because I trusted David with the accounts he had access to and never imagined he'd bleed us for his family behind my back. And here was the genius, the awful genius of the intervention. The family knew the money was disappearing. Of course, they knew they were the ones receiving it. And they knew that eventually I'd notice because I audit, because it's literally my profession. So they got ahead of it. They decided to define me as the reckless one, to seize financial control, and to install David, their compliant son, their inside man, as the sole controller of our money before I could discover that the recklessness was theirs. Intervention wasn't about protecting the family from my spending. It was about protecting the family's access to our money from my competence. They needed me out of the finances precisely because I was the one person who could see what they were doing and stop it. Yan had built the Helena is unstable and reckless narrative for years, so that when they finally moved to strip me of financial control, it would look like an intervention instead of a heist. It was a robbery dressed as compassion, and I was supposed to sign the getaway car's title myself in the form of a power of attorney, while 8 people told me they loved me. Let me tell you about the night I gave David one chance, before any of it, because it's the moment I understood exactly who my husband had become, and it's the moment I stopped being naive. After I found the drained money in the audit, but before the intervention, I sat with a terrible choice. Part of me wanted to believe there was an innocent explanation, that David would look me in the eye and tell me the truth, that the man I'd married 12 years ago was still in there. So one evening, without mentioning the intervention Kate had warned me about, I wanted to see what he'd do on his own. I asked him, gently over dinner, "David, is everything okay with our money? I've been going through the accounts. Some things don't look right to me. Is there something you need to tell me?" I gave him the door, wide open. All he had to do was walk through it to say, "Helena, I've been helping my family and I got in over my head, and I should have told you, and I'm sorry." That's all, 12 years of marriage, and I handed him the chance to be honest. And he looked me in the eye, my husband, the father of the life we'd built, and he lied. "Everything's fine," he said. "You know how you get about money, Hel. You're overthinking it. Maybe you've been under a lot of stress lately." And there, it was, "You know how you get about money, you're under a lot of stress." The exact language of the intervention coming out of my own husband's mouth at our own dinner table. Days before, his family would use those same words to try to declare me incompetent. He wasn't just failing to confess. He was rehearsing the script. He was already inside the lie, already part of the machine that was going to be aimed at me, already using Diane's vocabulary to make me doubt what I'd seen in our own accounts. That was the moment I stopped hoping. Because a man who's made a mistake tells you the truth when you open the door for him. A man who's chosen his family's scheme over his wife looks her in the eye and tells her she's imagining things. David had chosen. He'd chosen weeks ago, maybe months ago, and my gentle dinner table question had just confirmed it. I went to bed that night beside a man I no longer trusted, and I made a decision. I would stop hoping he'd save me, and I would save myself. The audit was my armor now, not my husband. I finished preparing, and I let them think I suspected nothing. Let me tell you about the midpoint, the moment I nearly signed anyway, because even knowing the truth, the intervention was almost powerful enough to make me doubt it. Here's the thing about a staged intervention. It is psychologically overwhelming by design. 8 people, all telling you the same thing, all performing love and concern, all certain. It does something to your grip on reality, even when you know it's theater. And they'd rehearsed. And I arrived home to find them all there, arranged, with Diane's folder of talking points. The sheer coordinated weight of it nearly buckled me. One by one, they delivered their prepared concerns. A spending decision of mine reframed as recklessness. A stressful period reframed as instability. A normal disagreement reframed as evidence I wasn't thinking clearly. 8 people billing a picture of a woman coming apart, and the woman was me, and even I, for a few minutes, felt the picture start to become real. That's what these things do. 8 certainties can make you doubt one truth, even when the truth is yours and you're holding the evidence in your bag. And David, this was the worst part, David sat there and let it happen. My husband, who knew I wasn't reckless, who knew I was the disciplined one, who knew because he was the one actually draining us, sat silent while his family called me unstable. His silence nearly broke me more than their words. Because if David, who knew the truth better than anyone, was letting them do this, then maybe I really was crazy. Maybe I really had it all wrong. Maybe I should just sign the paper and let the people who loved me take over. I actually reached for the pen. I want to be honest about that. In the overwhelming weight of 8 people's coordinated concern and my own husband's damning silence, I reached for the power of attorney, because signing it would make the horrible pressure stop, and some part of me, worn down, just wanted it to stop. And then I thought about Kate's warning. Don't sign anything. And I thought about the audit in my bag, and I thought, I am a financial controller. I have spent my whole career being the person in the room who trusts the numbers over the noise. 8 people are telling me a story. I have the numbers that prove the story is a lie. I am not going to abandon the numbers because the noise is loud. That's the one thing I know how to do. I trust the numbers. I put down the pen, and I reached into my bag instead. Let me tell you about the reckoning. Before I sign anything, I said, and my voice steadied as I found my professional footing, let's look at who's actually been bleeding this family dry, because I brought the numbers, and they don't say what you think they say. I set 2 years of bank statements on the coffee table next to Diane's folder of talking points. You've all spent the last 20 minutes telling me I'm reckless with money, I said. So let's audit the recklessness. I'm a financial controller. Auditing is what I do. Here are 2 years of our accounts. Show me my recklessness. Show me the impulsive spending, the bad decisions, the instability. Go ahead. Diane, you have a folder of my sins. Point to a single reckless transaction of mine in these statements. Diane, of course, couldn't because it wasn't there. Now let me show you what is there, I said, and I walked them through it the way I'd walk a board through a fraud audit. Over the last 2 years, tens of thousands of dollars have left our accounts. Not through my spending, through David. Transfers to you, Diane, to your son, to the family's loans and ventures and needs. Here's the transfer to cover Michael's business shortfall, $8,000. Here's the money to you, Diane, $12,000 over the 2 years in pieces. Here's the loan to the family that was never repaid. David has been quietly draining our joint finances to fund this family, behind my back, for 2 years. The room had gone very still. The rehearsed compassion was curdling into something else. And here's the part I want everyone to sit with, I said. You all knew. You were the ones receiving the money. You knew our finances were leaking because you were the leak. And you knew that eventually I'd find it because I audit, it's my job. So you got ahead of it. You spent years building a story that I was unstable and reckless. And then you staged this theater of concern, to strip me of financial control and put David, your inside man, in charge of everything, before I could discover that the recklessness was yours. This isn't an intervention. It's a robbery. And you wanted me to sign the power of attorney myself so that when I finally noticed the money was gone, I wouldn't have any power to stop it or trace it. You didn't stage this to protect the family from me. You stage it to protect yourselves from me because I'm the only one who can see what you're doing. I turned to my husband. David, you knew every word of this was a lie. You sat here and let your family call me unstable because the alternative was admitting you've been bleeding us dry for them for 2 years. So I need you to do one thing right now in front of everyone. Tell them the truth. Tell them who actually manages our money and who actually drained it. Or don't, and I'll have my answer about our marriage. Here is how it ended. The room fell apart because there is no recovering from an audit. Diane tried, of course, tried to say the transfers were family helping family, tried to reframe the draining as generosity, tried to insist I was still unstable for being upset about it. But the numbers don't reframe. 8 people had walked into that living room to perform my instability. They were now sitting in a room where the documented truth was that I was the disciplined one, and they were the drain, and no amount of rehearsed concern could survive contact with 2 years of bank statements laid out by a financial controller. And David broke. Faced with the choice I'd given him, in front of his whole family, with the evidence on the table, my husband finally cracked. He admitted it. He admitted he'd been moving the money that his family had pressured him. He'd been unable to say no to them, and unable to tell me, and that when Diane proposed the intervention as a way to get ahead of it. He'd gone along because he was a coward who'd rather let his family destroy his wife's reputation than confront his own weakness. It was not a noble confession. It was the confession of a weak man caught. But it was the truth, and it detonated the intervention completely because the family's inside man had just confirmed, out loud, that the whole thing was a lie. What happened to my marriage is the hard part, and I'll tell it honestly. David's confession saved me from the intervention, but didn't save our marriage, not immediately, not simply. Because the man I'd married had let his family stage an ambush to declare me unstable, rather than confront his own inability to stop draining us for them. It's not a small thing to forgive. We separated for a time. He did real work, therapy, going no contact with the family's financial demands, rebuilding trust in ways that were concrete and measurable, which mattered to me because I'm a person who trusts what can be measured. Whether we fully made it is our private business. But I'll say that the David who let his family ambush me and the David who fought to become worthy of my trust again were in the end different men. And I gave the second one a chance he had to earn every day. The family, though, the family was done. You cannot come back from staging a fake intervention to rob your daughter-in-law and being exposed by her own audit. Anne's power over the family's narrative, her decade of defining me as the difficult outsider, collapsed the moment the truth was on the coffee table. The money David had drained became a matter of accounting between us. Some of it recovered, some of it written off as the cost of learning who his family was. I never signed the power of attorney. I remained, as I'd always been, the controller of our finances, the disciplined one, the competent one, the one they tried to define as reckless precisely because my competence was the threat. There was one more scene, weeks later, that I have to tell you about, because it's where the intervention truly died, not in my living room, but in the family's own reckoning with what they'd done. Diane tried to rebuild the narrative. Of course she did. Women like Diane don't surrender a decade of control in one evening. She went around the extended family telling a revised story, that yes, there had been some financial confusion, but that I was still unstable, still difficult, that I'd humiliated the family and attacked David, and that the intervention had been well-intentioned. She was trying to salvage something, to keep at least the Helena is the problem narrative alive even after the money story collapsed. And it might have worked, Diane was persuasive, and the family was practiced at believing her, except for one relative. David's Uncle Raymond, an older man, quiet, one of the 8 who'd sat in my living room and read his prepared concern. Raymond, it turned out, was the one Ashford with a conscience that wouldn't quiet. And at the next family gathering, when Diane started spinning, Raymond said, in front of everyone, "Diane, stop. I sat in that room. I read the paper you gave me. I said things about Helena I'd been told were true." And then she put 2 years of bank statements on the table and showed us that everything we'd said was a lie, and that David, that we had been the ones bleeding them. I helped ambush an innocent woman in her own home because you told me she was sick. I've had to sit with that, and I'm not going to sit with a new version where she's still somehow the villain. She wasn't the villain. We were. I was. And I owe her an apology, and so does everyone who was in that room. Raymond came to me after. An old man, deeply ashamed, who said, "I'll let your mother-in-law hand me a script and I performed it against you, and I never once asked to see the proof, because it's easier to believe the family than a check. That's on me. You didn't just defend yourself that night. You showed all of us what we'd let ourselves become. I'm sorry, Helena, truly. I accepted it because it was real, and because Raymond breaking ranks was what finally ended Deanne's power for good. Once one of the 8 admitted the truth out loud, the revised narrative couldn't hold, and the family had to face what they'd participated in. Kate is the great gift of this story. My sister-in-law, the semi-outsider, who risked her own standing in the family to warn me, who gave me the weeks I needed to prepare the audit that saved me. Without Kate's phone call, I'd have walked into that intervention blind, overwhelmed, and I might well have signed the pen I reached for. Kate and I are close now, the 2 women who never let the Ashford Collective absorb them, and she told me afterward, I couldn't stop them from planning it, but I could make sure you weren't ambushed. That's the most I've ever managed to do against my family, and I'm glad I finally did it for something that mattered. She saved me. I tell her that often. For years, my husband's family built a story that I was reckless and unstable, so that when they moved to seize control of our money, it would look like love instead of theft. I staged an intervention, 8 people performing concern in my own living room, to strip me of financial control and install their compliant son as the sole keeper of our finances, before I could discover that the recklessness they accused me of was, in fact, theirs. They were draining us to fund themselves, and they needed me out of the money because I was the only one competent enough to see it. It was a robbery dressed as compassion. And they nearly pulled it off, because a staged intervention is overwhelming by design, and 8 coordinated certainties can make you doubt one true thing, even when the true thing is yours. But I am a financial controller. My whole career is being the person who trusts the numbers over the noise. And when 8 people told me a story and my own husband's silence seemed to confirm it, I reached for the pen. And then I remembered the one thing I actually know how to do, which is to audit the noise against the numbers. The numbers said I was the disciplined one. The numbers said they were the drain. The numbers said the intervention was a lie. So I trusted the numbers, the way I always have, the way that made me the threat they needed to neutralize in the first place. I put down the pen, and I opened the statements, and I turned their theater of my instability into an audit of their theft, live, in my own living room, in front of the 8 people who'd come to rob me. They called me reckless to hide that they were the reckless ones. They called me unstable to seize the control that only my stability had earned. They built a whole performance to convince me I couldn't be trusted with money. They forgot that trusting me with money was the one thing the numbers had always confirmed. And numbers, unlike families, don't lie for the people they love.